Welcome back to another episode of the Unqualified podcast, hosted by myself, Caitlin, as well as Jairus Martin. I wanted to come on today and talk a little bit about the concept of imposter syndrome, talking about it specifically in the personal training and kind of fitness world, but the idea of imposter syndrome in general, if you're new to the concept, if you've never heard of this before, it is this idea that you yourself feel like an imposter, hence the term. You feel like an imposter in your career and whatever your role is. You feel as though you are unqualified, you are not doing an adequate job. Maybe you feel as though you're lacking the skills or the ability to do what you feel is the job's best version of itself. And I think especially nowadays, like in the year 2025, I feel like with social media and everything, this is worse than it's ever been, because I think that we're often fed such like perfected images of every part of the world. We are given stuff within our algorithms. Like, I'll just speak for myself personally, like being a personal trainer, and like as well as a yoga instructor, my entire algorithm, I'm fed a bunch of other fairly highly successful, highly skilled in the industry, maybe for years, people doing things that are, you know, in my own inner worst critic, things that I deem like so much better than where I'm at right now. And so I think that in any career, whether you're a trainer or whatever it might be, I think that everybody struggles with kind of questioning their own self, their own stakes right now. But specifically in the fitness industry, the reason I wanted to talk about this is because I think that there is an issue, and Jairus and I both, this sort of is what inspired our entire product and business here. There is an issue or a gap in the industry when it comes to kind of the unspoken reading the room, reading people's psyche, if you will, like understanding the psychology that comes into being an adequate personal trainer. Because I know plenty of trainers that, it's funny because I am different this way. I will say I went to Temple University majoring in communications. So I did not, which this is probably why I have some imposter syndrome on the other end, but I did not major in any type of like kinesiology or exercise science. Obviously I've done a plethora of certifications since then, but the reason I bring this up is the thing that I don't feel insecure about in my job is my ability to connect, read people, and understand like the subtext that they need, like the cultivation that they might need in their training program outside of just the exercise science itself. Now, I think that most people in the industry, it's the other way around. They did whatever their background is, but they come in really understanding the physicality of things and knowing how to progress and regress people, maybe knowing how to make adequate modifications, whatever it is in the four walls of the gym. But then you are given such a spectrum of people with their own mental limitations. They come in with their own backgrounds of self-limiting beliefs. Maybe they have a bad relationship with food, like maybe they've had a disordered eating past. All the things that go into their physical health that like might not directly relate to lifting weights in the gym, but it relates to their physical goals. I think that a lot of trainers get thrown these curveballs and they don't know where to go from there. They're like, I can give you this programming, I can work with you in the gym for whatever these, weightlifting goals are, but I don't feel very confident in helping you outside of there. And when I said that there's a gap in the industry, I think that the gap is that our certifications, like it is very much a science. And so when we're learning how to be a trainer, or even if you are somebody who's advanced yourself to do nutrition certifications, or maybe some niche sectors of like a prenatal, postnatal, perimenopausal, corrective exercise science, if it's, for like elderly populations, whatever that advanced certification might be, a lot of the content is focused. My cat's over here shaking my computer right now. It's bobbing up and down. Sorry if it gets a little blurry. But a lot of the certifications, they focus just around all the science of it and all the nitty-gritty details that go into us as the trainers, as the experts, really understanding the details that build our scientific understanding. But it doesn't teach you kind of the psychology and sociology that goes with it. And something that Jairus and I have talked about a lot is that personal trainers, there's kind of this misunderstanding, or I think like lack of awareness around the idea that we're sort of like therapists. We're sort of like physical therapists, and we're sort of like mental therapists in a way, clinical therapists that might be doing like talk therapy. Jairus and I just said this the other day. We're like, think about a therapist in terms of imposter syndrome. A clinical therapist who's doing talk therapy with somebody, they understand that they're going to be given people from all walks of life with all backgrounds and all varying degrees of trauma, whatever it might be. So somebody might come in, maybe it's something as simple as, going through a breakup wasn't so crazy, I don't know, whatever, not to, undermine how bad a breakup could be, but maybe they're coming in with some very new, fresh, traumatic event that they want to help themselves mentally process, work through, and maybe after a few months, they feel good, they feel settled, they might not even go back to the therapist, they've worked through what they needed. And that same therapist the next day might also be given somebody who's dealt with some really traumatic events that started in childhood and continue to develop throughout the rest of their life. And they might meet with this therapist and meet with them for the rest of their life. And during that time, they may go through some ups, some downs. They may go through times of feeling very healed and very centered, and then other times where all that dirt gets brought back up, who knows? But the point of that is that a therapist knows that that's a part of the job, and they don't necessarily feel like failures. They may not experience imposter syndrome in a way, given that client, because they understand that that's a part of that job. And I go down that tangent to just say that I really think it's misunderstood that as personal trainers, we could be the same way. Because when we're given somebody, on the surface level, and I think especially decades ago in the industry, when we did not really know and tap into this like full scope idea of health and wellness, people that hired a personal trainer, it was like, I'm going in the gym and I'm gonna get my workout in with my trainer and I'm gonna leave and go home and do whatever the heck else I do. And we didn't really look into like, okay, if you've come to me to lift weights with me, do cardio with me, whatever, because you want to lose weight, because you want to, I don't know, all the above, beyond just working out with you, I want to help understand what are your food habits? What is your relationship with food? What is your career? What stress are you put under? Do you have a partner? Do you have kids? What's your day-to-day look like? How might stress be affecting the way you eat? The amount of energy you have to then work out or be active. What are your sleep habits? In what ways are you trying to cultivate a nighttime routine to not just get enough sleep, but to get deep, adequate sleep? All these things, back in the day, this was not something that I think most trainers looked into. And, to be honest, a lot of Jairus and I's kind of passion for what we're doing right now is that I think even a lot of trainers today aren't necessarily trying to dive into that with their clients. They're not going that deep. And so what we see are all of these trainers that have been meeting with people for maybe years, and these people maybe still are not getting to the goals that they set out. And then that leads a lot of trainers feeling, going back to this concept of imposter syndrome, you're kind of sitting there thinking, okay, like, what the hell? Like, am I not good at my job? Like, what am I doing? What am I doing wrong? Should I be doing more? And I guess the answer is kind of a little bit like maybe we should be doing more, but I think it's also the misconception that like my job is just in the four walls of the gym. And going back to the idea of the therapist, I think that our job is beyond whether it's deliberate to your client or not. Like, whether you're sitting down saying, hey, I want to build a mindfulness practice with you because you discuss being really stressed out. I want to help you cultivate a nighttime routine because you never get good sleep. Like, whether you're explicitly sitting down with your client, or if they don't seem into that, but they need that, it's like dropping all of that into the session the same way, going back to the clinical therapist thing. Like, I remember when I had started going to therapy, it felt like some voodoo stuff. Like, I was not in there. I always thought therapy would be very much like, here's your tools, here's your practices, we're gonna go through it, here's what you need to work on. And really, the session would end, we'd chit chat for an hour, and I wouldn't have clocked the fact that we built upon any specific practices. But slowly and surely, I just started to recognize that like my entire mindset and the way that I went about my day and the way that I went about conflict and, different interactions with people, all of that started to adjust. So all that to say, like, you as a trainer with your client, you may start to filter that in without them even recognizing it. But what you're doing is helping to alter some of the ways in which they are living their life outside of the 1, 2, if you're lucky, maybe 3 hours that you get to see them a week. Because that's the thing as trainers. We don't have that much power over our clients. We're with them for an hour or two a week. And, they've kind of given us this responsibility to hit all of these really like lifetime changing goals on a physical health and wellness standpoint. So going back to like that whole theme of imposter syndrome, I think it goes two ways. I think the first way is that a lot of trainers get put right into the industry and feel a lot of that imposter syndrome because the trainings that we're given don't always coach us into like that psychological aspect. We're not always like, and like I said before, even if you're somebody who does seek out, like, I want to go deeper. I want to get a nutrition certification. I want to get a stress management certification. I want to do even me myself, like, because I have my yoga certification, within that, I did a breath work certification. So a bunch of mindfulness techniques. Even if you take it that step further, you're not always taught the ways to apply it to your clients. And I think that like we walk through our lives with a really good understanding of all of that, but not necessarily an understanding of how to then transfer all of those tools and all that energy. So, a lot of trainers end up falling flat there, and it's not necessarily your fault. I think that the industry has sort of left us hanging a little bit. But there's kind of two sides of this coin with the imposter syndrome, because I do think the other idea is that we as trainers don't always then acknowledge that maybe it is our job to go even deeper with our clients. So understanding that, like, the same example I gave with the therapist, if it's our job to really try to change the psyche, like the food habits, the stress habits, like the ways that our clients live their lives, if we want to take on that load, we've got to understand that we might get that client, going back to the clinical therapist, we might get that client that's like, I've got this little thing, I already know what it is, I need to work on it. You give them some tools, those tools might resonate right away. And in a couple of months, you might get that really rewarding feeling of them fixing whatever that thing was. But it's really important to understand as trainers that you're also going to be given those clients who, when we talk about the whole cliche of a lifestyle change, oh, your diet has to be a lifestyle change, working out, valuing fitness. I say it in this funny voice because I feel like a lot of people, even clients that I have, they're like, yep, I know that's what everyone says. But I don't think a lot of people like latch onto the idea that, when we say lifestyle change, like that's difficult. If you're somebody who's 35 years old and you're just now reaching out to find a trainer for the first time in your life, you never played sports, you never worked out, it's going to be really difficult, or not difficult, but it's going to be challenging. It's going to be a lot of hard work to adapt and make yourself this new person. And that's not to say it's not possible, because it is, but as a trainer working with that person, it's work from both of you. And so that might be years of progress. And like, I know, like I've had my longest client I've probably had 4.5 years. And I'm like, we are still going back to some of the square one stuff. Here's another like analogy for it. So my boyfriend, he coaches golf. Great analogy for life, because that is one, it's a sport where nobody else but you're on your own. If you screw up, that's on you. But what's important about that is like, there's pros, there's Tiger Woods is out there who still, after decades of being the best in the game, like you hit crappy shots, you resort back. And what Justin, my boyfriend, always tells me, and when he's talked to coaches who have coached the pro athletes for years, they're like, a lot of times the lesson that you're giving to the pro who's been golfing since he was 6 years old, you're giving them the same cues and the same like advice and tips that you would give the intro golfer who's learning how to hold a club. Like, you go back to that square one. And that's to say that a lot of this is just, like it's a lifetime journey of, like just reaffirming these habits. That was a long tangent, but the tangent is the idea that us as trainers should not feel like failures. Like even Jared and I said the other day, we're like, all right, like with what we're trying to do and the things that we're trying to coach for people, it's like, well, geez, like shouldn't him and I have all of our clients feeling like they're the best version of themselves? Like shouldn't all of our clients, like if this is what we're doing, then we're good at it and our clients should be perfect. But it's like, no, that's almost the bigger idea to latch onto, is that for everybody, it's a journey, it's a process. And yes, there might be people or certain goals among people that are achieved very quickly and very efficiently, and ideas that are latched onto right away. But for as many of those clients you have, you're going to have just as many, if not more, that you are going through that process with for years. And I think that's kind of a part of what makes our job fun. Because going back to somebody who's a therapist, or even, I don't know if I brought up this example, but physical therapist, I talked about this as well. I think that when people are physical therapists, specifically dealing with, injuries and corrections, a lot of times when people are injured, it's imbalances in other parts of the body. And you'll notice if you've ever had to go to PT, like I remember, so I had really bad shin splints. I was trying to run a marathon. I developed these shin splints, never had this issue in my life. I go to, and again, like as a trainer, this is such a thing where it's like, I show up and I'm like, all right, guys, come on. Like, I understand the body. I know what's wrong with me. We get there, they do a hip assessment, they're doing like internal, external, looking at my, the hip flexor strength, and they go to push down on my leg and I almost fell off the table. And I was like, oh my God, what just happened to me? And I, even as a trainer, didn't realize that in my own body, I have crazy weak hip flexors. And she ends up doing in PT for me, for my shin splints. I go to PT for shin splints. I'm doing all hip work. I'm working glute med, I'm working the hip flexors, and we just realized that, other parts of your body are compensating. But so all that to say, the job of a physical therapist, which becomes fun and exciting for them, is you're kind of like putting together the puzzle. Like you're a little bit of a detective trying to figure out, okay, this client comes in and they've got this injury, and you're figuring out where it came from. You're figuring out where those weaknesses are at, and you're trying to go through different exercises. And again, similar to us with our training, a physical therapist is given like, okay, they have this injury. Here's a list of exercises that are going to help correct that. They have this injury from this weakness. Here's exercises to help weakness at the hip flexor, whatever. But any individual client has such a unique body, unique background, unique whatever. And so I've gone to PT where like they'll try to do something and it doesn't feel right, or it causes more pain, or whatever the issue might be. I'll literally sit there with my PT and she's like, okay, let's, I thought that was going to be a good one. Let's scrap that one. Let's try that. And it's always very, like explorative. Is explorative a word? Exploration, yeah, it's an exploration. So they sit down with you and they're not afraid to be open about like, okay, let's try this. We're going to try this. Let's see how it feels. And they might scrap it. They might latch onto it, and it's okay. Like, that it's kind of this process of figuring out like, what's your recipe? I think that personal trainers need to understand the same thing, that with every client, it's this discovery and this exploration with each individual, and understanding that you're kind of building that own unique recipe, and that recipe might take a really long time to get right. And that's a part of the job. And going back to that idea of like, that's what should be fun. And I think that trainers, I think that it would service a lot of trainers that are suffering from imposter syndrome and feeling like you're not good at your job, and you feel like maybe you're failing your clients, understanding that a part of the fun is going through that journey with your client and finding that recipe and fine tuning it and adjusting it, and just being open to the fact that every individual client is so unique. And again, some you might figure that out right away, and others it's going to be a bit of a process. And it's maybe not enough to just expand your own knowledge of criteria, but being able to understand the psychology and learning better ways to read a person, and being able to kind of deliver the correct, like, resonating coaching for them. So I guess my closing thought for all of this is, one, feel validated in the fact that if you've ever experienced imposter syndrome, like even Jairus and I just had that conversation the other day about how in what we're doing right now, we're feeling it a little bit, just because we all end up being a little bit of perfectionists. And so being open to the idea that this career is not about perfection, it's about that journey of kind of curating and cultivating the secret sauce for each person. And that's what's fun about it, and being open to it, and just always kind of opening your own mind to those new ideas and new gateways to go down. Thank you all for listening. Thanks for watching, and we will catch you next time on Unqualified.